1 minute ago, Birmingham changed. Not gradually, not quietly, it snapped. A city already stretched thin just crossed a line no one thought it would. Sirens cutting through the afternoon, streets locking down in real time, and a government scrambling behind closed doors as a new Midlands update sends shockwaves across the entire UK. This isn't rumour, this isn't speculation, this is the moment Britain feared. And it just happened. Birmingham has erupted again, and this time the timeline is brutally clear. At 3:17 p.m, an emergency bulletin leaked from inside West Midlands Police. An internal alert marked critical public disorder escalation imminent. It wasn't meant for the public. It wasn't meant for anyone outside the command chain. But within minutes, screenshots flooded social media, sparking the kind of panic that spreads faster than any official statement ever could, before authorities could deny, clarify, or even breathe. The city was already shifting. Streets around the inner ring road froze under a wave of halted traffic. Pedestrians stopped moving, staring at their phones, as a single phrase trended across every platform at once. Major Midlands update government silent. What unfolded next looked terrifyingly familiar. Crowds formed not out of anger, but gathering because they thought others knew what was happening. People shouting questions because nobody had answers. The tension didn't build slowly, it jumped from curiosity to fear in minutes. One inaccurate voice note claiming multiple attacks across the city spread to 50,000 people in less than 10 minutes. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter. The fear felt real. Inside the Bullring district, shop owners slammed their shutters closed, not because danger was confirmed, but because danger felt close enough to touch. Parents dragged their kids off the pavements, commuters abandoned buses mid-route, and cyclists spun around mid-street as messages pinged through group chats like sirens. And still, Westminster said nothing. At 3:29 p.m, a convoy of police units attempted to cut through congestion around Dale End, but the roads were already jammed with vehicles left sideways, empty or slowly reversing out of fear. One officer was heard on radio saying, "We can't reach the centre roadblock everywhere." Another responded, "We need guidance from London." But guidance wasn't coming. Not yet. That silence again became its own explosion. Outside Moore Street Station, the crowd ballooned so quickly that officers attempting to disperse people ended up being swallowed by them instead. Nobody was attacking. Nobody was rioting. They were simply packed, shoulder to shoulder, all convinced that something bigger was approaching. Rumours replaced updates. Whispers replaced facts. Someone shouted that a nearby building had been breached. Someone else claimed there were fires on the south side. People ran, others followed. Pavements turned into waves of movement with no direction, no target, just fear. Up in the skies above the city centre, a private drone began recording the scene, just like earlier incidents Birmingham has endured. When the drone dipped too low, a thrown object struck it, sending it spiralling down in a burst of sparks. The moment it hit the ground, someone yelled the word that always destroys calm. Attack. That single shout travelled faster than any police warning could. People sprinted in every direction, dropping bags, abandoning bikes, leaving behind anything that slowed them. And yet, through all this noise, the official channels remained silent. In Westminster, sources whispered that ministers were once again locked in argument. Deploy reinforcements, hold back to avoid escalation, release a statement, wait for confirmation. The debate churned while the city trembled. The same hesitation that fractured Birmingham before was resurfacing, a government afraid to speak, afraid to move, afraid to choose a side in a moment when silence was the most dangerous choice of all. Meanwhile, on the ground, humanity flickered through the chaos. A shop owner pulled strangers into his doorway as the crowd surged past like a tide. A bus driver swung open his doors and shouted for people to get in for shelter. A group of teens formed a human chain to keep a pushing crowd from crushing an elderly couple pinned against a railing. Fear was everywhere, but so was instinctive kindness. Still, the question boiled beneath every heartbeat in the city. What triggered this? And why wasn't the government speaking? Because 1 minute ago, Birmingham didn't just erupt, it exposed something deeper. Something far more dangerous. A system struggling to control the narrative of its own crisis. And a public forced to rely on rumours when the truth was nowhere to be found. By 3:41 p.m, the Midlands update that triggered the eruption finally reached national broadcasters, not through officials, but through leaked audio from inside the Regional Emergency Command. A tense voice, barely audible over background chaos, said 7 words that spread across the UK like wildfire. We've lost central control, awaiting direction. Those words, stripped of context, ignited a new wave of fear. To the public, it sounded like a collapse. To the government, it was an embarrassment. And to Birmingham, it was confirmation of what people already felt in their bone. That once again, they were standing alone in the middle of a growing crisis with no clear line to authority. Crowds that had briefly paused now surged again. Not in violence, but in pure uncertainty. Families held hands tightly, weaving through streets that looked more like evacuation routes than city roads. Strangers shouted warnings they'd heard from someone else who heard it from someone else again. A single rumour claiming armed groups were moving towards city centre shot across the region, travelling through WhatsApp chains with brutal speed. None of it was verified, but verification no longer mattered. Fear had momentum now, and it didn't need truth to keep running. At 3:55 p.m, West Midlands Police finally attempted a controlled broadcast over loudspeakers from rapidly deployed vehicles. But in a city choking on confusion, the message echoed through streets already filled with noise. Words bounced off buildings, half heard, half understood, swallowed by distant shouts and the roar of helicopters circling above. Some people thought the announcement said stay indoors. Others believed it said move away from the centre. The more officials tried to clarify, the more people misheard, misread and misinterpreted. The city wasn't just overwhelmed, it was out of sync with itself, every group reacting to a different version of the same crisis. Then came the moment that pushed Westminster into full pressure. At 4:02 p.m, live footage hit the internet showing a line of riot officers retreating. Not because they were losing control, but because the crowd in front of them suddenly surged backward, everyone running from something nobody could see. The clip lasted only 12 seconds, but it spiralled into every social feed in Britain. Captions screamed, "Police falling back" and "City breaking down." Television networks began looping the clip before officials even understood what they were watching. Politicians inside Downing Street found themselves reacting to social media before they reacted to their own intelligence briefings. Inside the Cabinet Office, the panic finally broke through the political walls. Ministers demanded immediate action, pushing for a direct address to the nation. But another faction insisted the situation was being exaggerated online and that a major statement would validate misinformation. The debate twisted into a full-blown argument while Birmingham continued to pulse with tension. Outside, the public wasn't waiting for them. They were searching for shelter, answers, anything that felt solid in a city where every alarm seemed louder than the last. But even in the thick of this chaos, Birmingham's humanity refused to collapse. At 4:14 p.m, near the Jewellery Quarter, a group of local residents formed a protective ring around several children separated from their parents in the crowd. Volunteers guided people into a community hall, using tables and chairs to block the doors from the pressure of frightened bodies outside. A few streets over, a taxi driver who had abandoned his vehicle returned to it after spotting 2 elderly men struggling to stay upright. He drove them both out of the congested zone without asking for payment, navigating side roads and alleyways by memory, not GPS. Meanwhile, social media, both the fuel and the fire, began showing glimpses of reality that cut through the panic. Videos surfaced of people calming each other, warning others not to trust circulating rumours, guiding lost kids to safety, sharing water, opening doors. These moments didn't erase the fear, but they anchored the truth. Birmingham was scared, not broken. It was confused, not consumed.